Just testing. We are going to reconvene. Vice Chancellor Garcia, you have the floor. If you'd like to go until our lunch break at 12, that's fine with our discussions. If your report and Valerie Purnell's is shorter, we'll start doing some of our board reports just to give members a sense of it. Okay, so we're on item, I want to get my item number, 3.2. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, President. Is this on?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you to President Malumet and Chancellor Scott and members of the board. What I'd like to do is give you an update on state legislative activity, and then I'll turn it over to Valerie Purnell, who will update you on some of the federal congressional activity. So as far as legislation, we're about midway through the legislative process, and legislation has taken some interesting turns. I think that legislators are very much focused on the issues of access and completion and affordability for community college students. Not surprising given the fiscal environment that members of the legislature are going to be looking at how we may deliver our community college education as effectively and efficiently as possible. So those themes have definitely pervaded the discussions in policy committees. And what I'll do is highlight for you some of the key bills that have emerged this year, some of which have been drafted since your last board meeting. So they're fairly new. The one issue I'll start with is, of course, transfer. This has been has taken on a whole new built momentum since we last met. I think a pivotal turning point was at a master plan committee hearing that Chancellor Scott spoke at, and he and Trustee Herb Carter, as he alluded to, talked about, they were asked to come in and talk about how we can deliver education given this fiscal environment and how we can continue serving the students we serve while not necessarily being able to count on augmented resources. And so they talked about the challenges and also the opportunities and things that they were looking at to improve the way we deliver education to our students. And transfer came up, and I think Chancellor Scott spoke eloquently about a proposal to streamline the transfer process considerably, and that negotiations were underway between the CSU and the community colleges, and how they were very optimistic about being able to make a breakthrough on this issue, which, for 50 years, given the anniversary of the master plan, has been the one area of the master plan that has been most challenging to implement. We've had numerous transfer initiatives, but they've all fallen short because of the complexity of dealing with intersegmental issues. It's hard. We're a system that has very defined missions, and what's challenging in this master plan is how we work intersegmentally. And I think that one of the breakthroughs we've seen because of this budget crisis is this 3 segments working intersegmentally. And that certainly has been the case for the transfer issue. So what's resulted from these discussions, and it started largely from Chancellor Scott and Chancellor Reed, and lots of interest in the legislature in saying, what can we do? So the concept that has unfolded is that for the first time, community college students would be able to take a course pattern that would be the equivalent of the AA degree in whatever field of study they pursue, and that they would be able to use that as their transfer passport, if you will, and transfer to a CSU at junior standing. That for the first time, the faculty in determining the academic rigor and requirements of an AA degree would be sufficient to permit the student to transfer without the CSU saying this course counts toward transfer or this one doesn't. So that was a significant change in the relationship between the CSU and the community colleges to acknowledge that our faculty, in fact, their professionalism in determining the academic program would be sufficient to transfer to a CSU. This would guarantee them transfer to the CSU system, but would give them priority for their major. If they got their AA in political science and they're applying to a political science program at one of the CSUs, they would be given priority consideration to the program. And that would not necessarily be an absolute guarantee, but it would be a guarantee to the system. So this is really significant. And what you have in front of you is a fact sheet that you can take with you. And as you talk to different groups or constituents about this major initiative that's winding its way through the legislature, you can use this as talking points. And I will note that right now the letterhead says Campaign for College Opportunity. They were the original sponsors of a transfer bill that was contained in the SB 1440, Senator Alex Padilla's bill, which has now been changed and encompasses the proposal that I'm speaking about today. So the bill that we've been supporting now is SB 1440 by Senator Alex Padilla. I will also note that we've been working very closely with Assemblymember Paul Fong and Assemblymember Blakesley, who have also expressed strong interest in transfer, and we're interested in pursuing a major transfer reform bill as well. So those three members are working closely together, and we're hopeful that eventually we have one common bill that we can all get behind and not have competing bills, and I think that's the direction that we're headed. But we're really grateful to them for bringing a major transfer reform concepts to the legislature, and a lot of that has just come together in terms of it gelling that the time is now to address this issue. There are a number of other specifics to the bill. For example, the CSU will not be able to require students to retake certain classes that they already took at the lower division level, and if in fact they think they need to supplement their major program, they would be limited to 60 units. So that would mean that a student would take 60 units of transferable coursework at the lower division level at a community college, transfer, and they would be required to take an additional 60 units. So this, we believe, will dramatically reduce the number of units, the average number of units it takes for a community college student to get a baccalaureate degree at a CSU. The current average is about 162 units. Florida, which has a similar law in effect, their average is 138 units. So we think that if we're able to reduce the number of units that our students take by 10% at the community college level and 10% at the CSU, we would be able to save spaces for new students, for about 40,000 new students at the community college level and about 13,000 new students at the CSU level. So this is an access and efficiency measure that has enjoyed broad support. I mean, we've seen it shift from an arcane policy issue, which just the insiders knew how transfer worked, to a very popular issue. And I think that it speaks to a lot of the work that has been done recently. And I do want to point out that the faculty, our faculty, has spent a lot of time working on transfer. Last year with the Assemblymember Bell's bill, they did a lot of work which became a cornerstone of this measure, and it's a major part of what we're trying to do. I know that Jane Patton and her executive committee have worked long and hard on this, and they're at their academic plenary session recently voted to support if amended, and are working with us on some possible changes, but they're also initiating conversations with the CSU faculty, which I think are really important to see if there are ways to make sure the faculty are both on the same page and trying to implement this if it goes into effect. So I think those are good conversations, and it may bring about some refinements as we move through the process, but all in all, the concept of being able to say to students, this is the pathway you can take. You get your AA degree in whatever field you choose, and then you can take that with you to a community college is a significant and powerful message that we hope will help many more students transfer. So that bill now is in the Senate Appropriations Committee, and even though it may have some fiscal costs, the long-term savings, we've already talked to the appropriations staff, they're very interested in the potential long-term savings this type of measure will have. Do you want to add anything, Chancellor Scott?
No, you said it extremely well. I think it's historic, this bill, and the amount of money it would save for the student, time and money, and the amount of money it would save for the state. Incidentally, it will have 39 units of general education, which is the CSU breadth requirement, and it will say that every community college will have an AA transfer degree of only 60 units, and that in turn, CSU, as Vice Chancellor Garcia explained so well, can require only an additional 60 units, and that the person who comes from the community college will have an automatic junior standing. Now, you may say, well, what's so different? Well, if you went through the maze that most students go through in order to go to CSU, and maybe it's one thing at CSU San Diego and it's another thing at CSU Northridge and something else at CSU San Francisco. This is systematic. It is supported. We have tremendous support. The CTA has supported it. The Chamber of Commerce has supported it. The list is long. If you look on the list, I'm not going to read the whole list here, but evidently there's some great work that's been done in getting various groups to get behind this. We have quite a number of ethnic groups that are in support of it as well. I believe, and didn't the NAACP support it? That's correct. And so we had some excellent Hispanic associations of colleges and universities, and the list goes on. And we had some excellent speeches made. Reed Bilburn from our own Student Center talked about how helpful it would be for the students, and I just feel like this is something that's really moving us along in a dramatic fashion.
Member Ramos?
Yes, this is excellent, and building on the Chancellor's comments, I was really impressed by the broad range of support from this coalition, really kind of people on all sides of the ideological spectrum. So let me ask a naive question. I mean, it looks like a slam dunk. Who would oppose this? What opposition might we face in seeing this through, realistically?
To date, there's no opposition, but I think people are taking a close look at it and analyzing what this means, and I think probably the CSU faculty are taking a close look at it. They have not opposed, but they are interested in figuring out how to turn some of the work they've done with our faculty, for example, under the auspices of CID, and look at how that integrates. But so far, we haven't had any formal opposition. You would also note that UC is not in this mix. We made a decision early on that it would be easier, and since the majority of our students go to a CSU, that we should start there and figure out how to make this work, and then at some point in the future, look at whether UC would like to join in this effort. And they're already talking quite a bit about it. And but because this would be a statutory requirement, you can't require UC to do this type of thing, so they can just observe and analyze it and determine whether at some point they'll want to join in on this effort.
I will point out that in Florida and in other states, and by the way, this is a movement it's beginning to be nationwide because of the recognition that it would save so much money for the states and save so much time and money for students. Where it's been adopted, eventually independent colleges, private colleges follow suit, and I think there's a real possibility that UC will follow suit because our transfer students are wanted.
Right.
And when we make it easier for them to transfer to CSU, then I think it won't be long till other four-year universities will say, by the way, maybe it's a good idea for us to come along and recognize what happens at the community colleges and accept those students.
I just had a follow-up question. So Assemblymember Fong and Blakesley's bills Are they,
They're moving along. We were supportive of the two bills in Assembly Higher Ed several weeks ago and stated for the record how much we appreciate their leadership. But they're moving along and at some point decide, whether we combine the efforts. And that's in progress right now, whether that will happen.
okay. Member Perez?
I just want to say I think this is a fabulous bill because it's doing exactly what we should be doing, and that's looking at the student and how do we make the student successful. And myself being a student that transferred and had to retake 12 classes, which was a lot of time and money, it's an unfortunate situation. So I just want to commend, staff for working with Padilla on this and helping to move this along because I think this is really in the best interest of our students first and their success.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions about this subject? No? Okay.
Okay, let me just highlight a couple more issues. One I want to point out is AB 2385. This is an accelerated nursing and allied healthcare pilot project that we've been working closely with the Speaker's office on. And the reason this has been an important bill for us to work with is it's a pilot, and the Speaker has been very interested in figuring out how we can prepare for what we expect to be continued growth in the allied healthcare and nursing profession. Right now, the nursing demand for nurses has somewhat tapered off because we believe retirements have slowed, but retirements will kick in, and with federal healthcare reform, there's going to be much greater demand. So anticipation of those kinds of dynamics, this is a way to take a pilot project that would last 5 years and start at 5 colleges and look at developing an online nursing program or allied health care program. Because of the clinicals, it wouldn't be 100% online, but it would be the majority of an online program. And as Vice Chancellor Patrick Perry has stated, that most of our online is coursework, and we haven't had the opportunity to do as much development of program. And so this would be on a small-scale basis, provide an opportunity for us to experiment and develop that. The other advantage is it is a Speaker, and he, as well as we, have strong relationships with the Secretary of, the U.S. Secretary of Department of Labor, and there's some grant opportunities there and various federal funding opportunities. And we would work closely with the Speaker in securing those kinds of funds to help underwrite the cost. And this bill would be contingent on being able to get those kinds of funds. So we're in the process of working with the Speaker and with the stakeholders to talk about how to do this and to do this as cost effectively as possible. And it would be contingent on getting some outside funding. So it's worth noting that this would be an example of something innovative on a small scale that will help us learn about what we can do to accelerate the learning process for our allied healthcare professionals. The next bill I want to bring to your attention is one that's been a little more challenging for us. It's SB 1143. And this is a bill, and there have been several bills that have...
Excuse me, could you just tell us on what page of your handout that is to be found, since we're all shuffling through it?
Oh, okay. It's all summarized here in the handout. Funding for completion would be the bill that
And what page number?
Page
What
6.
Page 2.
Six?
Backside,
Page 2
right.
and 6, okay. Thank you.
Right. So this is a bill that would propose a change to our funding methodology for how we fund FTS. It's a major change that the concept of wanting to encourage greater completion by funding, but currently we fund our FTS around the 3rd or 4th week. It's called our census date. And the funding for our courses is determined based on that 3rd or 4th week participation. This bill would change at a second census date at the completion of the course and take an average of between the 3rd and the FTS number average between the 3rd and the completion of the course to determine our FTS. The problem with that funding calculation, and Vice Chancellor Skinner can probably add to this. He's been intimately involved in working with the author and staff on this and trying to explain how what it would do is unless we had 100% completion, we would basically have a net loss to our funding. And and we've explained not even Harvard or UC Berkeley have 100% completion. So that's a very challenging standard that would be placed on the community colleges. So we've conveyed our concerns and said, we too are looking for ways to address completion, but in this fiscal environment, a proposal that will, most likely bring about a significant cut to our funding base, and we anticipate, based on our current figures, that could be a hit from about 7 to 8% to our base budget. So it would be very significant without giving us any additional tools that help students succeed, such as counseling and tutoring and all the other resources that have been cut so dramatically. So the author is Senator Carol Liu, who's been someone we've worked with closely. So we're working closely with her, and I think a lot of community college representatives have expressed their concerns. The bill did get out of Senate Ed. As a subcommittee. It was presented as a subcommittee, and then it got out of Senate Ed, and it's now going on to the Appropriations Committee. So we'll be working very closely with Appropriations staff and with the author and her staff and members of the committee to convey our concerns about this particular proposal.
What has been the response from, Legislative Blue's office, legislators? About the concerns.
They are listening and want to keep moving the bill forward, and are committed to the goal of improving completion. And I think they've drawn many of these recommendations from a report that says, this is what you need to do. And so they're just weighing out the information, haven't made any decisions yet. And there may be others who've had other conversations with them. We talked at length with the staff, and they took in the information we provided but didn't make any commitments at that point.
Member Baum.
I had a question. Have the faculty weighed in on this? Because
Yes, they have.
It seems like they would feel pressured to pass students even if they're not qualified, because there'd be a financial penalty
Lots
for
of
that.
groups have weighed in on that issue. There could be lots of unintended consequences. HACU, the Hispanic Serving Institution organization, has weighed in and said, look, there could be students who are either kept out of classes because they are maybe perceived as at-risk students, or grade inflation, or giving students Ds instead of letting them withdraw so that they can get their funding. So there could be a lot of unintended consequences, and those are precisely the issues that we're addressing with the staff and
And the faculty are
others.
engaged on that. Great, thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions from the board? No? Okay, please continue.
Well, I have a question. Has anyone from the community college's chancellor's office actually talked directly to the legislator, or have you only met with staff?
Chancellor Scott has had some conversations.
We scheduled a lunch to talk about this. Frankly, if this isn't changed by the time it gets to appropriation, we will vigorously oppose it and defeat it. I think the legislator is open to some changes in it, because I don't know that it was fully realized what a hit it would be on community college funding. There have been some states that have looked at ways of funding that might include some other indices, but no state has taken anything like this radical approach. I mean, to say that you'd only be funded on the basis of completion, number one, it would, as I believe the studies reveal, it would be about 8% cut in the funding, something like that. Is that not right, Vice Chancellor Skinner? And of course, we've just taken an 8% cut, so we don't much want to do that. The state of Washington, for instance, set aside a small amount of money, and they put about 7 different indices on the funding, including completion, but such things as basic skills completion, the completion of math, et cetera, et cetera. So this is, frankly, I don't think it's a well put together bill. And so it will be our intention to either ask the legislator to change it or to outright oppose it. And we'll make that very clear.
Thank you.
I see Reed Melbourne would like to speak.
Yeah, I'm sorry to just jump in. I actually met with Carol Liu last week and had a discussion about her bill about these outcome-based funding. She said she was interested in working with the students and the chancellor's office to look at alternatives and was interested in maybe working on the language of the bill with us. So I just hope you don't mind me jumping up here to say that.
Good.
Thank you.
So we will continue working hard at conveying how devastating this bill would be to our system. The next bill I want to call to your attention is a bill that attempts to make college more affordable for students, and that is AB 1997 by Assemblymember Portantino. And I bring this to your attention.
What page, since you gave us such a great handout?
Okay, this one is actually listed under financial aid. I decided, I'm not sure what page.
Page 5 is financial, funding, facilities.
Under financial aid, student fees and financial aid affordability.
Page 11.
11?
Page 11.
Okay.
No, 5 is the
Thank you.
And I call this to your attention because there's been a lot of attention, obviously, focused on federal Pell Grant aid and it being funding being augmented for federal financial aid, and the question about how to ensure California students take full advantage of these increased aid opportunities. So this proposal would require that any student applying for a BOG fee waiver, one of your fee waivers, would also be required to fill out a federal financial aid form, the FAFSA. And in concept, it's an idea that makes a lot of sense, but the devil's in the detail, and converting to that process does have some fiscal and workload implications. So we're working with the author to address that. But in the process, we've have some information, research information that was just recently released that analyzed community college participation in financial aid programs. And what this report noted, the TICAS report, and Linda, Vice Chancellor Michalowski can address this better if she'd like to, but in the TICAS report it says that 80% of all BOG fee waiver recipients actually do complete a FAFSA. So a good number of our fee waiver students complete the FAFSA, but the bigger challenge is how do we capture those students who aren't applying for anything? So that's one of the issues we've brought to the Assembly members' attention, and that the challenge is larger than just BOG fee waiver students, but how we expand participation among the ranks of students who currently aren't applying for anything. Vice Chancellor Michalowski, would you like to add to that? And as she's getting the mic, this is really an important area for us to look at. I mean, financial aid has grown in funding considerably at the federal level, and so we are very interested in figuring out how we can expand the participation amongst all of our students.
Many of you probably saw the headlines that resulted from a report by the Institute for College Access and Success that said that the California community colleges are leaving, they estimate $500 million on the table in federal Pell Grant money because of students who are not accessing it. And when we asked for their data on how they made that calculation, what they told us was that they estimate that 23,000 BOG fee waiver recipients would likely be eligible for a Pell Grant who aren't getting it. But that's 23,000 out of almost 800,000 BOG fee waiver recipients. And at the same time, they identified a much bigger population of perhaps 500,000 students who are not getting financial aid of any kind, including the BOG fee waiver, who they estimate would be eligible for both our state aid and for federal Pell Grants. So we've been talking with Mr. Portantino's office about how to make sure that we are, looking for more ways to capture that huge population that's outside of any contact with financial aid right now. And as it is, our numbers have been growing dramatically year after year. Since the state provided some funds to augment administration and outreach in our financial aid offices, our Pell Grant recipients have increased by a third. And we are hearing this year that there is a third consecutive year of double-digit increases in the numbers of students applying for financial aid. So this is a very dynamic area right now. Our financial aid offices are also heroic in their efforts to process more and more students who are in need of financial aid because of the economic situation. And many of them require individual attention because they or their parents have lost a job, meaning that the information that you report on your financial aid application is no longer accurate at the time that you are enrolling in school, and they have to do a case-by-case individual review of a student's current economic circumstances versus those that were reported on the standard application. So it's a very challenging time, and we're very happy to work with Mr. Portantino's office to try to find solutions.
So to just make more concrete what we're talking about in terms of the financial aid that potentially could be available to a student with full need, we're talking about $7,000, $5,500 in Pell Grant aid, which has recently been increased, and about $1,500 in Cal Grant B if they're eligible. So it's a significant amount of funding that can make the difference between a student going to college or not. So we will continue working with the legislature on that one. As far as there are a lot of other bills that are moving through that will be important to monitor. Please take a look at the state legislative report, and if you have any questions about other bills, I won't get into them now, but you can certainly call me or email me, and I'm happy to respond. I do want to just touch on the Intersegmental Advocacy Day for a second. There are a couple of other elements that were really dynamic about that day, and I do want to acknowledge Vice Chancellor Eric Skinner and Vice Chancellor Carrie Carbaugh for the work they did in helping facilitate the day's activities. And Terry, in particular, brought a lot of news coverage to the event, and that turned out to be a significant opportunity to spread the word up and down the state that, in fact, the three segments of higher ed and the three segment leaders, along with their boards of governors, and students have come together to meet with legislators and the governor. So we got some tremendous press coverage, and Terry and her staff did a great job. As a matter of fact, community colleges were the ones who facilitated the full media operation for that day, so it was great. And then Eric, of course, was instrumental in helping us frame the budget message that would be common to the three systems. And that was challenging because we have slight differences in our budget proposals, but we did find that common message, and it was access, and it was affordability, and Cal Grants. So that came together well. I also want to update that Vice President Scott Himmelstein and I met with the State Board of Ed's representatives last Friday to talk about developing a joint State Board of Ed and Board of Governors meeting at your next July meeting. And the date we talked about is we meet on July 12th and 13th, and they meet on the 14th, 15th, and 16th. So it looks like the 13th will be the day that intersects both meetings without having to fly people out specifically for an additional meeting, and that we're looking at the late afternoon, early evening, doing it somewhat differently as opposed to a formal board meeting because of the size of the two groups. It would be challenging to find a venue that can accommodate so many people, but instead we thought about doing something that is a dinner roundtable where we could have dialogue and have some presentations on key topics and meet together in a banquet hall is essentially the way it would work. And I think member Scott Himmelstein probably has some comments about that and the topics that we think would be fruitful for a joint board discussion.
Sure. It was actually a very, very good meeting on Friday, and we learned that the members of the State Board of Education were not only very receptive to our overture, they were enthusiastic and also want to bring some topics to our attention as well. But Chancellor Scott and I and President Malumed kind of recapped our meeting of a couple months ago, and the three topics that we're going to look to discuss, and help me, Chancellor, if I go blank here, but was career technical education and the articulation of those classes, something that I have been pushing that, and that the State Board of Education, we found it, is also interested in this notion of dual or concurrent enrollment. We all know that we are getting a lot more customers in community colleges due to the cutbacks at CSU and UC. So what can we be doing, particularly in the senior year, to offer concurrent enrollment? And how do we work with the Department of Finance and others to make that better happen? And something that the chancellor certainly has pushed is the notion of basic skills. So I think those are the three areas. The idea was that we would take some testimony, so to speak, and then facilitate a discussion between our two boards on those issues and see if there are things that we can work together on a policy level, on a regulatory level, or maybe even an advocacy level with the legislature and the governor. Also, we had a representative from the Secretary of Education's office, and this is something we're going to try to get the governor to open the session up for us, because these are all issues important to him. So Marlene did a great job, and she and her staff and the state board and their staff are going to work on the logistics. As she said, we're probably going to have to look at an outside venue of some kind, because it's going to be hard to get 29 people around a table. And so to that end, I would ask maybe Member Ramos and Member Reed to see if appropriate, and I don't know that it is, Steve, maybe you can help, that maybe this is something that the foundation could help us fund if there is some minimal cost to an outside meeting place of some kind.
One thing I wanted to mention, because of our foundation meeting that took place last week, they are planning on having a joint dinner with us on the meeting date of July 12th and 13th. So we need to address that issue.
Well, it would probably be on Monday night, the 12th.
Okay. So it would...
Because we've already got a date for the 13th.
Right. We do.
Scott, can you just, I got down career tech ed, concurrent enrollment, and what was the third?
Basic skills.
Or we can ask for
I mean, the State Board of Education does not have a foundation, obviously, so.
Can we get a thought, maybe from Steve, about his sense of whether that would be a problem, a conflict, or an issue?
I don't see a problem with that.
Thank you.
So for planning purposes, for the next meeting, that would involve staying through the evening on Tuesday. That would be a change from your typical practice. And more details will come your way as they're developed. I'm going to shift to federal relations so we can get
Excuse me, before you shift, I'm not quite sure who came up with these, but as we did our advocacy day, we had these big handouts, and I brought them with me. And just to give you a sense of what it says, our competitors aren't waiting. In fact, they're ramping up and talking about the intellectual flight from California. Growth in science and engineering BSs, China versus the U.S. The deans have big grins on their faces. The deans from colleges outside of California recruiting our faculty. So I'm not quite sure, but
that was developed intersegmentally, specifically for this advocacy day. Terry Carbaugh worked with her communications colleagues from UC and CSU, and they developed it jointly.
yes, Member Davis-Lyman.
I'd like to congratulate Terry and her colleagues, because of all the pieces that we left, that was the one legislators opened up, they liked it. And then the other piece was, and it's in the back of my car, I'll bring them in tomorrow to hand out.
Well, I'll pass
do you have the red sheet that the students, the academic senates of all three intersegmental groups put together with contact numbers? It was a really great hit piece, too. Actually,
I don't
President
think I ever
Jane
got
Patton
one.
has those.
Oh, okay.
Just so happens.
Yeah.
And I'll just pass these three around so people can look at them, but I would like them back when you're done.
Okay. I'd like to say something.
And I'm going to turn it over
Wait
to...
1 second.
Sorry.
Chancellor Scott. and then-
Well, a long time ago in positions of leadership, I found out the key to one's success is to choose good staff. They always make you look good. And I have to say that about a year ago, when we were able to choose Terry Carbaugh as our Vice Chancellor of Communications, we did an outstanding job because constantly we're getting such good press. And that's because of her past skills that she developed. She has lots of contacts in the media. And if the community colleges in California are getting more news than they used to, it's because that Terry and her staff are doing such a good job. So I do want to compliment our Vice Chancellor of Communications for the kind of job she did. She worked hard on that advocacy day, but she works hard all the time.
And then, I'm sorry, Member McDonald.
Okay, just briefly, I want on page 3 on your bills of interest. I'm looking here. It says we still have a position of support, but it says the bill has been dropped. This is one of our goals, the vice chancellor and for vice chancellors and state agency status on the Ruskin bill. Where do are we okay with this? We're not okay with this, and where is the pitfalls if we have it?
Well, we've decided to drop that bill.
Okay.
There's been some opposition, and we were working with the opposition, and it seems that with so many other things going on, we've decided to focus our attention on transfer and some other key priorities, and to look at pursuing this maybe another time.
Shall I talk to you offline about the opposition?
SEIU was
Okay.
opposed. Yeah, we can talk more.
Okay.
And the legislator decided that he wasn't as enthusiastic about the bill.
Okay.
So I'll be blunt about that.
Okay.
And I, in fact, wrote a letter to the staff indicating that there have been some myths that had been passed around about the bill that I thought were incorrect.
Thank you, Vice President Himmelstein.
Yes, Marlene and Chancellor, I'm glad you did say that, because I was going to chime in that the author did drop the bill, which I view as unfortunate. I think this was an important effort on the part of our Chancellor and this board, and I would ask, I'm a little reluctant to say we dropped it. And knowing what I know around this place, there are other opportunities and other authors. Is it worth it, Chancellor, in your opinion, or Vice Chancellor Garcia, for us to take a less than drop it position and see what other avenues we might explore? I think this is a very important issue for us. I agree that maybe this transfer bill is more important, but I'd hate to just back off of this.
Well, I think that the wiser thing would be to perhaps decide that we would renew our attempt next year. I don't, I mean, I just, you know, I've been in this business a long time. I've been a legislator, and, you know, legislators have, you know, obviously, if they decide to drop a bill, they decide to drop a bill, and there's not much you can do about it. But I don't much think that it's wise to try to resurrect the bill in this session. I would think it would make more sense to go to the next session. But I will go ahead then and pass out this little note that I did write about this particular bill.
Well, and I also am very supportive of the concept, so we will not forget it, and respect your opinion about what we can and cannot do this year, so we're still sad.
If I may, I'd like to turn this over to Valerie Purnell, our Federal Relations Assistant Vice Chancellor, but I also want to just thank our staff in the GR division. They have planned 2 federal relations DC trips. They've planned 2 advocacy days and a reception, and they have been really terrific in doing whatever they need to do. So in particular, Mike McGee and Sandy Jacobson and Rosa Deanna have been doing a lot of this advocacy planning, which has become a growing part of what we're doing in addition to monitoring legislation. So I just want to express how grateful I am to their work.
Thank you all. It's good to see you again. It seems as though so much has happened on the policy front since I saw you last. We have, obviously everyone knows, we have had major reform on the healthcare front. Reform that's been some 40 years in the making, as well as reform on the education front. And I think the overall message that I bring you today is that although at our last meeting we were a little challenged, disappointed, shall I say, that many of our education issues seem to have dropped out of the reconciliation fight at that point in time when we were looking at the budget. Things are looking up, and still education is a part of the current budget agenda and remains a part of the president's agenda. I think that's the major message, and what I would say is that there are opportunities for us to build upon that momentum and continue to build our visibility, particularly as the California community colleges. So Marlene's comments about advocacy at the state level, I hope that at some point in the not too distant future, we'll be talking about that kind of advocacy at the federal level as well. You do know that we went back in March, as Marlene said, at our second attempt, and that is an event that's part of an annual event that we've been doing for some time. But as we begin to branch out on specific issues specific to California community colleges, I hope that we can do some of the kinds of advocacy we're now doing on the state level, and would love to have you all a part of that. To say that the mood in Washington has been, fierce and vitriolic at some time, and some days I felt that might be kind of an understatement. It seems as though the partisanship is still alive and well, and will certainly continue through the upcoming elections. We have right now the fight over financial reform. We have a huge backlog of administration appointees. That's definitely a partisan battle. And then, of course, we have a Supreme Court nomination coming up. And so all of those things will continue to make that mood pretty tough. The good news is that in the fray, we are still there. And specifically, there are some of the proposals that we thought were going to just drop off the face of the planet during the budget and reconciliation battle, as I said, have still there. Last time I spoke with you, we were talking about jobs. That's what we said. So I think the most important piece to share with you today on that front is that in April, you probably have heard, there was proposed the Keep Our Educators Working Act. Proposed by Senator Harkin, who is chair of the Senate Appropriations Subcommittee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. There's also a version on the House side. That would provide $23 billion in aid to states to allow them to hire education personnel. And this really is a response to the fact that all over the country, states are having to cut back on budgets. Education has been hit particularly hard in the fact that they've had to give educators pink slips left and right, and that is leading to major issues such as reducing course availability, as we know in our system, but also even at K-12 levels, talking about going to a 4-day a week education availability, lots of cuts left and right. So this particular bill is meant to help restore some of the funding. Last year, we had some funding that came to education to help restore jobs, and that was very, very helpful in California as well as other states. This particular Keep Our Educators Working Act is in response to the fact that that Stabilization Act funding that we previously received when the stimulus package was first released is set to expire September 30th of this year. So those funds are going away, and this is an attempt to preserve education jobs at least for an additional year. Those funds can be used to hire teachers, counselors, educators, principals, all of that. So each state will get some of that money. In addition to the jobs area, another area where we're seeing ongoing support for education, where we thought we might have lost it, is in Pell funding. So you know that we have now moved to direct lending, and direct lending in federal financial aid will take full effect on July 1st. The chancellor has just sent a letter that basically has come out of Vice Chancellor Michalowski's office that has gone to all the CEOs, encouraging and really just saying to folks, it's here, it's happened, you need to move quickly, and an encouragement to preserve as much in the way of federal financial aid as possible. Naturally, when there's changes like this that have major fiscal impacts and workforce impacts, there's this desire to kind of hunker down and say we can only do so much and we're going to eliminate some financial aid options. We're really encouraging folks to not take that approach. Look to some of the support for moving to direct lending that comes out of the Department of Education. And there has also been proposed in the appropriations process an additional amount of money to support the move to direct lending. I'm investigating that a little bit more because I'm not sure if any of that money is actually going to trickle down to educational entities. It may be just to hire the droves of people at the federal level that are needed to do some of the processing with some of the banks that are still going to be processing financial aid, but just not in the same way. We've been able to expand Pell Grant funding, and there is also an appropriation, an additional supplemental appropriation that would seek to fill in the gap of the remaining Pell Grant shortfall. When we talked about moving to direct lending, part of the $61 billion that was to be saved in that process went to backfill the Pell Grant shortfall, which was estimated at that point to be about $19.5 billion. Still, I'm sorry, 13.5 was provided in reconciliation, but the backfall was thought to be something as high as $19.5 billion. So there is proposed a supplemental appropriation to close that gap, which will be wonderful for our students and wonderful for our system. The $2 billion that was in the Reconciliation Act for community colleges is to provide services to those who have been displaced or those who are unemployed. There are probably very many creative ways to get at that money. Fortunately, that money will move through the Department of Labor and work in close coordination with the Department of Education. Being that we have great contacts in both of those departments, I think we are well positioned. The community colleges really continue to be well positioned. One thing that I would say about being well positioned, another thing that I would say about being well positioned is that, you know, as we continue to be funded, community colleges and education in general, there are many pundits, as well as, I'll just say, commentators on education that say that as the funding for higher education in general increases, so shall the accountability. And I think, again, we are well positioned because of the transfer initiative that we have on the table. Will go a long way in addressing some of our critics that have said we've not made it easy enough for students to move from segment to segment. Also, our nursing initiative, accelerated nursing initiative, that's another signal that community colleges have heard the message about the need to support people who have been displaced, people who seek to get into the healthcare industry, into the nursing programs in our colleges specifically. They haven't been able to do that. We've heard waiting lists of up to 4 years of people trying to get into a nursing program. Interestingly, I met recently in some of my other investigations a Marine, a veteran, who's trying to get into a nursing program. So he's covering at least 2 of our, you know, sensitive populations, and we want to make sure that we're moving in that direction, and I believe we are. That will go a long way in helping us address any kinds of accountability measures that are put forward. So markups are happening on the appropriations bills in all of our relevant committees. I'm happy to report that last time I talked to you about our Veterans Initiative. It is in the appropriations process, happily. It was placed there by Congressman Filner, who is the chair of the Veterans Affairs Committee on the House side. So I don't think that we could have a better sponsor for that particular initiative. Now our challenge is keeping that in the process. And so I'm working hard to do that, and we'll most likely be calling on some of you all and your influence to help that process happen. Another opportunity that we will have to highlight the California community colleges will come in October. You probably have heard that Dr. Jill Biden has been called on by the president to host a community college summit. That is going to happen in October. They are in the early stages of developing the agenda for that and people who are interested in participating. So you know that we will be front and center in saying, yes, we are interested. We do want to participate. Would love to have the chancellor, you know, speak there. And so I think that highlighting in DC, our transfer initiative, our accelerated nursing. There are many other programs. I'm sure the vice chancellors have some programs that they would love to see highlighted. We can send a message that as the largest system, we definitely understand the importance of our place and the important role we play in economic recovery. So I'll keep you updated on that. They continue to say we're really in the early stages, so they don't know much more than it's going to happen in October. But you can just tell that there's a lot of conversation going on about who is positioned where in this summit. That's to be expected. And so our goal is to get positioned very well. Part of that positioning, and this is my last point, will definitely be about veterans. Before I started this position, I knew veterans, I respected them, loved them. I had no idea of the tremendous challenges veterans face in returning, especially student veterans who may have gone in to military service with not all the footing that they may have needed. And so I can say that in working closely with Member Baca, Member McDonald, it feels as though the Veterans Committee has a great deal of opportunity to highlight the fact that we as a system are putting forward a system-wide effort to improve our services to student veterans. And looking at the appropriations requests that have come in from other educational institutions, several of them are asking for things like a Veterans Resource Center or this individual or that individual center. I have not seen any other requests that take this full system-wide approach that we are taking. I think that's an opportunity for us to highlight that, to push it, to be a model nationwide in this area. And I will be certainly working with the Veterans Committee, with Vice Chancellor Michalowski on really making that as broad, as comprehensive as possible, because I think there are lots of opportunities to pull in many of the other initiatives that we're working on and see ways in which we can leverage those initiatives along with what we're doing for veterans to not only highlight them, but really provide a broader range of services to student veterans and models for everyone else. So, thank you.
Well, thank you for your report. I'd like to speak first, please. The biggest wow on our Washington trip, Member Baca, was meeting Ray Jefferson, the Assistant Secretary for Veterans Employment and Training. And he's dynamic. We had a very exciting meeting. So my question to you is, there were lists of things to do, and on our side, they were all things for you to do. So since that meeting, has anything happened yet? Can you give our board a little sense of what some of his plans were and how quickly things can happen?
Well, I will definitely agree that that was a wonderful meeting. Again, out of the Department of Labor. He works with Veterans Education and Training Services, VETS. And what he offered was an opportunity to the community colleges where the Department of Labor, his department specifically, would bring together, all of the kind of veterans organizations at the representatives of the veterans organizations at the federal level, plus many veterans serving organizations, student veterans, GI Forum, lots of different folks, and allow us to kind of roll out our veterans initiative to them, have a third party be the person to say, this is important. And that's just tremendous. There are lots of opportunities to coordinate the work that they're doing. They have an initiative that talks about veterans being important to the business world. And they want to bring in business people to learn more about some of the myths. You know, if someone has PSTD, you shouldn't hire them because they're going to explode. Well, that's not necessarily the case. They have an educational initiative on that front. I have talked recently with Vice Chancellor Mian about some programs that I've learned about and had participation in recently, where we can ourselves look at ways to say to the business community that the community colleges is where veterans are landing. And the community colleges is a partner, can be a partner with you in helping get the training the folks need and get them into your businesses. Hopefully, we'll be able to do something on the apprenticeship front. Vice Chancellor Millon has shared that there are some phenomenal programs that we already have in place that could be expanded. And so my vision is to say to Secretary Jefferson, we already have in place a lot of the elements that could be just a natural follow-on to what they're doing at the Department of Labor. I'm very, very excited about that possibility, possibilities to really create a partnership between business, community colleges, and the armed services, and employers who have jobs for our student veterans.
Yeah, so it was very exciting. Thank you. Member Perez and then Member Thomas.
So it's nice to hear there's a act in place to keep our education working. My concern with that, though, is if I heard you correctly, it's only 1 year. Are there any discussions about ongoing funding efforts? Because I can only imagine how difficult it is to try to hire people with uncertainty that employment's only going to last for 1 year. And then the other thing is I know there's some great programs out there for folks that have graduated from college to actually give them opportunities to start teaching in schools, and there's opportunity to fund those type of programs as well at a lesser expense than overall cost. So is there any further discussions on the federal level about some of those opportunities?
I think that the discussions are ongoing and will continue. The challenge is whether that can get funded. The encouraging thing is that we're hearing consistently from specifically Secretary Arne Duncan and I would therefore say the administration that there's certainly a recognition of the problem, and they are saying that with the stimulus money from the first pack of stimulus money plus this jobs bill plus Pell, the federal government will invest more money in education than ever before. That said, it's still not enough.
So what I meant to say is there discussion around permanent funding?
Well, I don't know. I'm not aware of any permanent funding at the federal level, other than money that might come through some of the specific grant programs, projects. So I haven't heard anything about the federal government's going to put in a major stopgap, if you will. It's really a state issue, and I think that there would be true, controversy if you had the federal government now saying, and now we're going to, bail out education in a way, and there is some help there, but I don't know. But, I would be happy to look specifically for that, to answer that question. I think most of the program funding is going to come in ways that the latter portion of your question suggests. It may be program specific, not, a major block of funding, permanent funding.
Though I will add, when we met with, I'm looking at my notes, Frank Chong, who's the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Community Colleges under Martha Cantor, he did share Arne Duncan's style. And what he said was, Arne Duncan likes to say, this is my goal. And the federal government will give you money if you achieve the goal. And you will decide how you will get to the goal. And I heard that very clearly, and within a week, it was in the newspapers that that's what Arne Duncan is doing for K through 12. Right. So just substitute the words community college, because that's what I believe we are going to see is the federal government wants change. They know where they want change to end up, and they're not going to tell everybody how to do it. And there will be pots of money. And I believe they will be long-term pots of money because they're going to really try and turn the ship. So that's what I expect to see.
The greatest example of that has been the Race to the Top funding that's happened at the K-12 level. And there is a new round, as they're calling it, of Race to the Top funds that have been released as well, that are about to be released and competed for. And that's a part of this ongoing education, commitment to education that I'm referring to. I will tie that comment to an earlier comment that I made about accountability. There were states that won that Race to the Top money, but they did so after making major reforms. So the goal is something that we may not always, I mean, generally there will be agreement, yes. But again, when you get to the details of how that happens, it can be challenging. You know, California has not yet really won on that particular fund, in that particular pot of funding, but there are opportunities. But so I would agree, President Malumed, that that is likely to be the kind of model that will be competitive. Much of the money that we've talked about, the $2 billion, some of the other monies that were in SAFRA, those were by and large competitive grant programs. The federal government does want the state to start working collaboratively with business, with our education partners, and in innovative ways.
Member Thomas?
Yes, my question is also related to that, keep our educators working. And as we all know, educators come from various constituency groups. And my question is, was that funding that you were talking about that focused primarily or solely on academic employees, or are we talking about all constituency groups within the education field?
Senator Harkin mentioned specifically when he announced this that it can be education employees of any type. So he said counselors. He started with principals, teachers, principals, counselors, janitors. So I think in at least their initial thought is that it can go far and wide, and that it would probably be up to the states to make that decision, I'm guessing. But let's remember that that funding has not, succeeded quite yet. So who knows what it will be when it finally gets through the process. You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? No? Well, thank you for your report. We appreciate it. It is about 12:20, so I suggest we adjourn for lunch, and we'll have a 1-hour adjournment until 1:30. We'll come back.